My daughter handed me her senior schedule, and everything in me wanted to grab a pen and cross one class off. There were more AP classes than I thought any teenager should carry in a single year. I could already see the late nights. I could see the stress coming. And I'm a school psychologist. I've watched this exact load flatten kids. So I did the hardest thing that I could do: nothing. And here's why. I told her that I thought it was too much. I did say that. But neither of us really knew if I was being a concerned mom or just getting in her way. So we asked her counselor. And I was sure that her counselor would say, take one off, protect her mental health her senior year. That is not what she said. She told my daughter that for the schools that she was reaching for, she should keep the harder schedule. And just like that, I had a different decision to make. Do I keep pushing her to pull back, or do I just let this become her decision? Every instinct in me wanted to protect her from how hard I knew that it could get. But I stepped back, and she struggled. And there were nights that I was sure I had gotten it wrong. I'll tell you how it ended, but not yet, because I've also sat with a very different student, a girl also struggling. And with her, staying quiet would have been one of the most dangerous things adults around her could do. Two teenagers, both struggling, two completely opposite right answers. One needed me to step back, and the other one needed the adults to step in. So how are you supposed to know the difference? Because that's the question that parents ask me all the time. When do I help? When do I stop helping? When do I let them struggle? And when is struggling actually telling me when something is wrong? After more than 25 years working inside of high schools, I don't think there are two choices here. I think there are three: step back, coach, or step in. And the middle one is the one I think parents miss most often. Because coaching is not taking over, and it's not walking away. There's a rule that I use for that middle category that can keep you from doing too much. I call it minimum effective help. I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. But first, let's go back to my daughter, because there is something important about that story that I didn't understand clearly at the time that I do now. My concern was reasonable. I wasn't being irrational. I knew her, and I knew her workload, and I knew how much she expected from herself. And I knew senior year could get really hard very quickly. But here's what I had to ask myself. Did she lack the ability to make the decision? Or did I just not like the possibility that the decision might be hard? These aren't the same thing. She had thought about it, she'd talked to me, she talked to her counselor, she understood the trade-off, and ultimately, it was her schedule, so I stepped back. This is the first category: step back. You step back when your teenager has the skills to handle the situation, and the consequences are recoverable, and your biggest reason for interfering is that you don't want them to be uncomfortable. That last one matters, because one of the hardest things about parenting a teenager is that sometimes you can see the mistake coming. You know they're going to wait too long. You know the conversation with the teacher is going to be awkward. You know they may regret the decision. And sometimes your job is still to let them find that out. Not because you don't care, because they need the experiences where the lessons belong to them. There's a difference between danger and discomfort. And sometimes we step in because we're trying to eliminate discomfort. Your teen is nervous to email the teacher, so you email. They don't know exactly what to say to the counselor, so you say it for them. It works, and the problem gets solved, but your teenager learns absolutely nothing about how to solve it the next time. That brings me to the second category: coach. There's a giant middle ground between rescuing your teenager and saying, figure it out. That is where you want to think about the minimum effective help. Ask yourself, what's the smallest amount of help that you can give them to allow your teenager to take the next step themselves? Not finish the whole problem, just take the next step. Let's say your teen needs to email a teacher. The maximum help version is that you write the email, maybe even send it. The minimum effective help is maybe you're asking, what do you think you need to tell your teacher? Then eventually you'll say, you've done this before, you know what to do. Same problem, very different lesson. Or say your teenager has 6 assignments missing. The rescue version is you open the grade portal, you make the list, you decide the order, you tell them exactly what to do, you remind them every 20 minutes, and by 10 o'clock at night, you're more invested in the missing assignment than they are. The minimum effective help sounds more like this. Show me what's missing. What do you think you can still fix? Which teacher do you need to talk to? What is the first thing that you're going to do? You're helping them think. You're not doing the thinking for them. That distinction is enormous, because the goal is not to see how effectively you can solve your teenager's problems. Of course you can do it faster. You're an adult. You've had decades more experience. You can write the better email. You can remember the deadline. Faster is not the goal. Independence is. And every time that you do something for your teenager that they could have done with a little support, you may have solved today's problem, but you're quietly keeping tomorrow's problem alive. And if you give that minimum effective help and they still can't move, that tells you something too, because sometimes coaching isn't enough. And that's when the third category starts to matter: step in. Here's where this advice can go very wrong, because sometimes stepping back is exactly what you should not do. Remember the girl that I mentioned at the beginning? Her mom's original concern was actually pretty ordinary. Homework was taking her forever, every night. Things that should not have taken her very long were taking her a tremendous amount of time. And taking a long time to complete homework can look like a lot of very different normal teenage problems. Maybe she's distracted. Maybe she's procrastinating. Maybe she's a perfectionist. Maybe she just needs better organization. Every one of those explanations would have missed what was exactly happening. One day I had pulled her from class for something at school. She missed an all-school survey while she was with me. And I thought, no problem. We'll knock it out quickly. I'll read the questions. I'll read the answer choices. She can tell me her responses. Done. Except it wasn't done. I would read her the choices, and then I would wait and wait. It was taking her so much longer than I expected to choose an answer. So eventually I stopped thinking about the survey, and I asked her what was happening in her head while she was trying to choose. This is when it became clearer. She wanted her answer to be right. She kept rechecking it. But these weren't math problems. There wasn't a right answer. They were opinion questions. Still, she couldn't move on until she felt certain that she had answered correctly. That conversation was when we began to suspect that something more was going on. Ultimately, OCD entered the picture, and suddenly her mother's concern that homework was taking forever looked very different. The homework wasn't the problem, it was the clue. That is when you step in. Not because your teenager is uncomfortable, not because you don't like their choices, not because they got one bad grade. You step in when you see a meaningful change in functioning, something different. The responsible kid suddenly can't get anything done, or a different situation where a kid who used to like school is fighting you every morning about going. The social teenager who suddenly stops hanging out with anyone. The homework that used to take an hour now takes 4. Their sleep or mood changes dramatically. That's when I don't want a parent saying, I need to back off, they're almost an adult. That is when you need to start getting curious. What changed? Because sometimes what looks like laziness, defiance, poor motivation, or bad time management is the surface. And if you only react to the surface, you end up trying to fix the wrong problem. So when you're standing in the kitchen wondering whether you should step in or back off, I want you to ask these 3 questions. First, do they have the skills? Can they actually do what I'm expecting them to do? Not, should a 16-year-old be able to do this? Can this 16-year-old do it? If the skill is there, you can probably step back more. If the skill is partially there, coach. Give the minimum effective help. Second, are the consequences recoverable? One bad quiz, recoverable. An awkward email, recoverable. A consequence can be painful and still be recoverable. Those experiences can teach. But if a teenager is digging a hole and it's getting deeper every week, multiple failing classes, chronic absences, complete shutdown, they may no longer be learning from this struggle. They may be getting buried by it. And third, are they still functioning like themselves? This may be the most important question of all, because struggle is normal. Teenagers are supposed to struggle sometimes. My daughter struggled during that senior year. It didn't mean that I had made the wrong decision by stepping back. She was still functioning, she was still moving forward, she was still managing her life. She was doing something difficult. That's different from a teenager whose functioning suddenly changes. And by the way, my daughter made it through that year. She ultimately earned a full scholarship to a university that she loved. I can't tell you that taking those AP classes is why she got the scholarship. I don't know that. But I do know this. If I had overridden her decision because I was afraid that she might struggle, I would have taken ownership of a decision that she was capable of making herself. So the next time that you're standing in the kitchen, not sure whether to reach in or hold back, run it through these 3 questions. Do they have the skill? Are the consequences recoverable? Are they still functioning like themselves? Step back when they can carry it, coach when they're close, and give the minimum effective help, enough to keep them moving, but not so much that you take the problem away. Step in when the ground is actually shifting, because the goal was never a teenager who never struggles, and it was never a teenager who never needs you. The goal is a kid who can one day say, I have a problem, I know what I can try, I can take the first step, and if I really need help, I know how to ask for it. That is readiness. And you can get them there by doing the hardest thing that there is, staying close enough to catch what is truly too big for them, and far enough back to let them find out what they can manage themselves. The same thing I had done in my own kitchen, with a pen in my hand and a schedule that I was terrified to leave alone. That's the view from inside the high school walls. If figuring out what your teen needs from you each stage of high school is the part that keeps you second guessing, I made a free roadmap for exactly that. It's the first link below. I'll see you in the next one.